Lena Bakari, let's unpack that now with John Manley, former Deputy Prime Minister of this country under Jean Chrétien. Sir, thanks so much for making time for us here on CP24. Let's start with the remarks. We heard from the Canada-U.S. Trade Minister Dominique LeBlanc saying he feels optimistic but not naive after this first round of conversations. Donald Trump saying, sure, both sides can make an agreement if they agree. How tough is that if? How tough is it to get to that point?
Well, I guess there's always an agreement if both sides agree. It's kind of a tautology. But I think there are some stumbling blocks here. First of all, Canada has an agreement with the United States. We entered it after a long negotiation, signed it with the President of the United States at the time, who happens to have been Donald Trump, in 2018. And that provided for essentially duty-free access to the U.S. market. On his first day in office, he essentially broke his promise. So question one for Mark Carney is, does he have a reliable counterparty with whom it's worthwhile to make an agreement? Or can we expect the president to renege despite having to agree to various things? Secondly, can we get an agreement that is of lasting duration? One of the possible outcomes, because of the framework that was agreed to in the USMCA signed in 2018, is this periodic review with any country being able to give notice of withdrawal. And the third thing is that the United States, even though it has lost decisions at the dispute resolution panel, declines to enforce the decisions that have been rendered. So you have that disrespect for the process, a disrespect for the agreement. I think it's going to be tough without some pretty clear indication that we have something that we can rely upon and the Canadian companies can rely upon.
Ambassador Hillman came out of the first round of meetings saying they're working with a president who is convinced that his tariff policy is going to get him closer to his overall goals, and that the Canadians are convinced that this policy against Canada is going to be detrimental to actually getting the U.S. president closer to his goals. How do you square that? How do the Canadians actually get through to this president?
I don't think that it's a matter of we can get through to him. I think it's a matter of figuring out where we have leverage and where we can perhaps be persuasive. He desperately wants some access to some of the mineral wealth that we have in this country. Rare earth, as they're sometimes called, minerals, not because they're so rare, but because they're really hard to get at, and because they're found in very small quantities. We've got a lot of them. They need them. They need them for their technology equipment. And if they don't get them from us, they're pretty much resigned to having to get them from China, which is farther down on his list than Canada is. So we've got some leverage in some areas. In the auto sector, for example, it would cost billions of dollars to relocate manufacturing operations from Canada and from Mexico into the United States. Quite apart from whether they could find the workers to do those jobs, who's going to pay those billions of dollars in capital expenditures? The customers that buy the cars have no desire to pay an extra $5,000 for their Ford 150s. People want the lowest price that they can get, and they're going to continue to look for that. So I think on our side, we're saying, look, ultimately facts matter. We believe that tariffs are ultimately paid for by domestic consumers, and tariffs also shelter inefficient industries. And so that will, in time, result in higher prices for Americans, lost jobs, and a slower economy. The question is, do Canadians have a higher pain threshold than Trump supporters in the United States have? Because when his supporters, when his core base starts to turn against him, that's when he can be persuaded.
Sir, you served this country as our foreign affairs minister in the aftermath of the September 11th attacks, a tragedy that really showed the true bond between our two nations. Today, we saw the U.S. president wearing a pin that had the Canadian and U.S. flag on his lapel. What do you make of that? Was that symbolic, or was this a showman of a president being a showman after talking about annexing our country?
Yeah, he's coming to Canada. I'm sure they, like I do, they have a drawer full of these pins. Mine all have the Canadian flag and something else. So somebody gave him the pin and said, you're going to Canada, you should wear this one, because he wears a U.S. flag pin all the time. So I don't read anything into that. I mean, let's face it, I don't think he was, in his dreams, he might have thought about annexing Canada, and he got a rise out of people when he said it. So, but was he serious about it? I don't think so. I think that for whatever reason, our former prime minister triggered his bully instinct, and he took it out on him. But I'm not concerned about that. I am concerned about the impact for our economy, given that we have spent 35 years building an integration with the U.S. economy strategy. And if that's no longer our strategy, we're going to need to think of a new one, and fast. And it's not going to be easy to initiate.
Certainly, these are pivotal times for our country, negotiations with the United States. John Manley, former Deputy Prime Minister of Canada, thank you so much for your time and your expertise this evening.
My pleasure. Thank you.